Hello, 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 everyone.
Hello, hello. I'm sitting here listening to that groove.
It's a good group.
Hel-
So the artist is LSA, and it is a single woman artist. I love that song. It's called "Take Me Serious." It's a
Yeah,
great song.
beautiful.
Great
Um,
song.
so welcome everybody.
Welcome everybody to Courageous Custody, Real Stories, Real Solutions, your weekly dose of empowerment and practical guidance.
Yeah, we understand the unique challenges protective parents face in the courtroom. And so our mission every week is to equip you with strategic thinking and emotional support that you need when you navigate this difficult journey with strength and resilience. We're here to help you do that. So if you're a protective parent facing seamlessly impossible custody battle, you aren't alone.
Every Thursday at 7 o'clock Eastern, we're going to go live on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, bringing you real stories. Hear stories about courageous parents who have walked in your shoes and emerged victorious in big ways and small. Their journeys will inspire you and offer invaluable insights and expert advice. Get practical strategies from us to help you advocate for your children and manage your trauma as you go through your custody case.
Yeah, so don't miss out on getting your own insights from our conversations. We would love it if you were to jump in with your own comments as we chat so we can include you in the conversation and hear from you too. So remember that courage is contagious. Courage is an aspect of self, and together we can rewrite the narrative for protective parents. So let's dive in.
Let's dive in. Just a quick reminder to everyone, we do not give legal advice or therapy.
Yes. And so if you are feeling triggered in any way, we do care about you and we do want you to take a step back and take care of yourself, maybe come back and join the conversation.
Mhm.
So today's topic is the best way to approach mediation with a narcissist. We touched on mediation a little bit last week, and so we're going to go into a deeper dive about it today.
Yeah, and mediation can be such a great way to save money. I mean, it feels like the legal fees are just like everything you're paying for is emptying your bank account faster than you can replace the money, right?
Right.
So this week's real story, we've actually got two stories, Regina and Jennifer. We kind of want to do a compare and contrast. Regina, when she was working with us, so she was tired of her controlling ex, and this guy refused to allow anything to move forward with the kids. She had wanted to get therapy for them. One of the kiddos wanted basketball. One of the kiddos needed a speech therapist. He just kept saying no.
Mm.
Jennifer was dealing with a physically abusive ex who couldn't be bothered with the kids, left it all on her, which she was mostly fine with, right? But when they filed for divorce, he refused to move out and kept taking their three girls the minute he'd get home. He started working from home, but in reality, he was shoving all of his work into 5 to 8 a.m. He was getting early on purpose. And then the minute the girls were awake, he was making glorious pancake breakfasts, Mickey Mouse with the ears, taking all three girls to school, waiting for them at school pickup. It
Sorry.
sounds like I like your ring. It's got a little bit of a I feel like I'm already on vacation. We're getting close to break.
I
I
am
feel
so sorry. I have it on Do Not Disturb, and that is my sister. She's the only one that can get through that. So
we've got the people who get through the DND. I got it. So Jennifer, where were we? Oh, yes. So what he was doing was he would even go to school pickup, and then but he wouldn't bring them home. He would take them out and he wouldn't bring them home until after bedtime. So the homework was suffering, the children were exhausted. Jennifer was distraught. She was distraught all the time because she didn't know where the kids were
oh
or if
yeah.
he'd ever bring them back. That was her big fear. Will he even bring these kids back? Weekends, he would disappear with them each morning at 8 a.m. and return after 10 p.m. So he was essentially taking the girls away. Now, when we look at how Regina and Jennifer approached their mediation, because they both ended up going into mediation,
Mm-hmm.
Regina put together a parenting plan for a proposal, right? She used, we have a very detailed template. And so she used that. It was detailed. That's the big thing, was detailed. So it was long, but it was really detailed. It tried to cover all the loopholes that these abusers would come up with. She also let her lawyer know where the buck stopped. Like, this is absolutely what I got to have. So the other thing she did that that I'd recommended to her that she did really well was during mediation, she'd ask for a break whenever she needed to course correct her lawyer or discuss something with her lawyer. She didn't get everything she wanted, but she did mediate and she ended the legal spending. So she was successful in getting an agreement. The win for her, which she said, Renee, I am totally good with this. The win for her was she got the top 5 priorities she wanted. Because we worked so hard on how do you communicate these things with your lawyer? How do we do it in writing? How do we do it while you're there? How do you do it beforehand? And
Mm.
we had it on lock. So the rest of what she was able to achieve for her children, besides those top 5 things, felt great. So she didn't feel like she was losing anything. Jennifer, um, because she was so distraught, she was unable to really do anything. She was paralyzed, right? We talk
Yeah.
about it's like you just see
Response, dysregulation, all that.
So she ended up leaving it in her lawyer's hands, trusting her lawyer, which can be okay. In this case, her lawyer just told her, just leave it in my hands. And whenever her lawyer said during the mediation, look, this is the best you'll get, Jennifer was like, okay. She was also really deeply triggered while she was in the room with her abuser, right? She was calling me a lot during the mediation. They ended up with 50-50 in spite of the fact that he didn't even know these girls' like best friends' names or their favorite colors. They ended up with 50-50, even in mediation. It's like, if you're going to get 50-50, you may as well make the judge say it, right? But she got no money and no property either, right? So I say that for today, we got Regina, we've got Jennifer. Let's talk about the easiest ways to prep, because clearly that was the difference between the two and their outcomes. One of the differences, so that, people can achieve, people can hear us talk about how does anyone achieve their goals in mediation, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I say this a lot in our weekly conversations, Renee. That blueprint, when our clients use the blueprint, that puts it all out on the paper. We're going to go over some of those tips later on when you talk about preparing with your lawyer. But when it comes to that blueprint, there's specifics, right? It's like very detailed, very outlined, because when we are in the mediation space, we're now there in the presence of our abuser or our abusive ex. And so oftentimes clarity goes out the window. We're
Oh,
just in
yeah.
that survival, trauma, sympathetic fight or flight.
Yeah.
And so either fight comes out and we sound combative, and I'll talk a little bit about that later, or we want to just get the heck out of there. And so if we can't leave, we'll disassociate, right? We'll associate, we blank out.
Yeah.
And so it's just, please, lawyer, do whatever needs to be done for me in this situation. And that blueprint provides so much clarity, especially when it's needed, because I can't sit there and think about all of those things when I'm handling all of my emotions and in my limbic system, these autonomic, nerves, our autonomic nervous system. And this just happens, it's biology. It just naturally happens. It's not something we can control. So we have to
yeah.
for that. Yeah, our nervous system, that anxiety kicks in, the fear kicks in, all that fight, flight, freeze, survival responses kick in. And so having somebody there who can follow the clear plan, if we're able, to communicate and have that out for them, that's puts us in such a much better position when we work with our protective moms.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I feel like, even if, like, I know a lot of moms are listening who are not part of the blueprint. So let's talk about what is it that we know that we got to do, right? So the details, yes. Preparing your lawyer. And, here's what I'll tell the people who aren't working with us with our blueprint, is there's really, you've seen this, our negotiating preferences for lawyers piece. There's really just 5 things that you have to do with your lawyer, right? So it's like whenever anyone goes into mediation with a lawyer by their side, I always like to say that there's basically 5 categories that you want to put together for them. You want to know what your must-haves are. You want to know what your want-to-haves are, which is like, I really want to fight for this. I don't want you to not fight for it just because it's not a must have. This is still a want to have. So I want us to fight for this. And then the third category is really can let go of. It's kind of like, look, please, Mr. Mrs. Lawyer, fight for this as well, but let's not waste a whole bunch of time and energy on this. And then there's don't care about. It's like, so as soon as they start to fight for it, maybe you want to turn it into leverage, or maybe you just want to say, fine, 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 let's move on. And then there's, something that doesn't really fit into those obvious categories, right? And I know we've talked about this, and it's something that our moms sometimes it's a mystery to them, which is leverage points. What are the leverage points, right? Like what makes up leverage points? And so there's one important thing that I like to say about, people going in and figuring out, first off, do I want to accomplish anything in mediation, or do I just want to go through the motions? But if you've got a good mediator, if you've got a mediator who isn't just, there's some mediators where, look, their entire job is about just get the two to agree, and that's enough. And there's something to that. But when moms are in a room with a narcissist, that's hopefully not the type of mediator that you do end up getting. You want the kind of mediator who's going to recognize the imbalance, because what kind of a proposal do they come up with, Atra? When the narcissist walks in the room, what kind of a proposal are they walking in with?
Oh, they get everything.
They get everything, like all the time in the world, right? And they get everything custody wise. They get everything, and it's just it boggles everyone's minds. And it's almost like the more extreme they are, the better, because then the mediator will have a better sense. And then the question becomes: is your mediator it have a particular skill set to be able to kind of find a way to get what's best for the kids and do what's fair? But moms come in with this fair agreement. Remember, we talked about this last time. They come in like, or protective parents, moms or dads come in with a really fair agreement that they're all like, well, the mediator is going to help me make this happen because it's fair and everybody's going to see that. And then the other side comes in with SEs just like totally skewed to them. And then they try to meet halfway. So those leverage points then are really the kinds of things that is kind of like, look, if we go to court, this is what we're going to have to bring forward as evidence. So a lot of moms will talk to us about how much evidence do I bring into the mediation. We're all kind of like, no, like you don't want to be bringing evidence into the mediation unless you've got something that is worth to your abusive co-parent is worth not going to court for. Now suddenly you've got these great leverage points. And then other leverage points are usually things like he really wants to always have them on 4th of July. So let's use that as a leverage point for me to get something that I know the kids want to enjoy with me and my extended family. Right.
Yeah. And you're negotiating. You're coming in there negotiating with the narcissist. And it's not going to be any different than when you were married to that person, or when you were living or in relationship with that person and trying to negotiate with them over even something as simple as picking a color for a room or going out to dinner or any of those types of things as it went on. Because I'm sure in the beginning you got love bombed all over the place and things were great. But then as time goes on, we start to see that it's really a struggle to work with these people. And so when we come into that mediation, it's good to have an idea of the must have, the want to have, the can't let go of, the don't care about, and those leverage points sort of in your back pocket. It's really important to be clear on what those are.
And lay it out for your lawyer, right? That's what your lawyer needs to be aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love, we've talked about this before about really staying grounded. And we mentioned it earlier about how you're in the room with your abuser.
They're smirking, they're provoking you.
Oh my goodness, body language, it is there, that one of the traits of a narcissist, right, is that superiority, right? That lack of empathy because we hear so many times in our protective moms, like, how could this person do this to me? We actually had agreed on something before we went into mediation. And I go in there and this is what they have now. And I stuck to our agreement. The goalpost has changed. Surprise. That's what happens. And so it's really important to, as much as you possibly can, not put yourself in a space with this person if you don't have to, right? So you can minimize the triggers if it's possible. And one of the ways you can do that to stay grounded is find out if you're in a state or a province or a district where the DV will allow for different rooms, right?
Yeah.
It's
There's
really,
domestic violence. Yeah, they might.
yeah. And I love that sort of keep it sort of to the point and simple, be very clear about what you want,
Yeah.
because they do move the goalpost and they will exploit things that you say. So you
Yes.
don't be long-winded and be these long answers. It's not necessary, because we know narcissistic trait, one of those is to exploit.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you're using the word exploit. And it's, so if you taketh away, right, you have to giveth something. And it's like, well, if I'm not able to, if you're telling me that when he or his lawyer ask me a question, to just say, well, tell us your thinking on this, or why is it that you want that I shouldn't give them an honest answer. It's kind of like, well, we're not asking you to be dishonest. Rather, we're saying to be strategic. I mean, look, if it feels like things are moving forward and you can talk back and forth, that's one thing. But if they're not really giving up much and they're just asking you questions and you feel like this is my chance and I can actually explain in a way where everybody in the room can see that I'm doing what's best for the kids, and then everyone will chime in and say, well, then let's go for that. That's not often the reality. And so you end up giving up sort of your strategy and that type of thing. So then what I like to give is ask a question back. If you're asked, well, why is it that you're wanting, you think that the kids should have Thursdays over here or whatever it might be. It's kind of like, well, um, do you happen to recall how things were with Thursdays, in the past when we did it that way? Do you remember how it benefited the kids? Right? Just kind of put it back on them. See what it is that they're going to come back with, or say, well, that's an interesting question. Aren't we both wanting for the kids to be able to enjoy this activity? Right? Just ask a question back. It may seem like you're being difficult, but unfortunately, mediation is a little bit of a game, even when you're being sincere. And while we don't want it to be a game, I want to be very clear about that. You also can't be a doormat. It's okay to push back a little. And if you're not getting anywhere, then obviously you don't want to sit and just give them all the details of your thinking so that they can twist that against you in the future.
No, absolutely not. And if you're the protective parent in the room, understand that you're the one that cares the most in that room. Nobody cares more than you. So for us to have an
Mhm.
expectation, or for a protective parent to have an expectation that somebody else is going to care about your story and more than you do and fight just as hard as you're fighting,
I see what you're
the
saying.
hope is that, but that's not the reality. The people in the room, they're not your buddies, they're not your friends. And oftentimes we're seeking validation or somebody to say, hey, did you hear what this person just said? Did you hear what this person said about me? Isn't that awful? That's not often what's going to happen, right? That's just not that's what we hope is going to happen.
They're not
But
going
when
to come to your side just because you're being.
no, so
It
understanding
can
that
happen.
you're,
No.
it can, but it often doesn't. I don't see it often. So
Not
walking in going, I'm the one that cares the most about what happens to our child in this room, and having sort of that perspective that I don't have an expectation that anyone cares more than I do. So it maybe kind of lets go of that need that they have to care about as much as it for me to get my way.
Because it doesn't really matter, and I not to them, right? It's
No,
I
not to
mean,
them.
just generally speaking, I think I have seen, um there are some mediators I've seen in particular, and for some reason, there's a city, there's a particular city where it's like there's this amazing mediator that we keep sending everyone to. But more and more, I think due to COVID really changed the court system in some ways in terms of a lot more flexibility about what can be done over Zoom, a lot more flexibility about keeping distance and how to accommodate that. When it became necessary to accommodate that, suddenly we found that that could be used for other reasons. So I have seen mediators who recognize when one of the parents is being browbeaten, and what I've seen them do is take them into 2 different rooms. If they're on Zoom, then they set them up in 2 different Zoom rooms, even if that's not where they started. But if they're in person, then they'll separate them out into 2 different rooms, and then the mediator will go between one and the other because they recognize that one parent is browbeating the other. And I think that that's great. I find that those, that's a sign of a mediator who's kind of getting it. But whether they get it or whether they don't, it's not their job to litigate. It's
Yeah.
not, they're not, they're not really rooting for you. They're not your
I,
legal advocate. They're advocating for both of you. And so in a way, they're advocating for neither of you. I mean, this is a little bit philosophical, but
but it's
the idea
true.
is to get you guys to come together. And if that's what you're in mediation for, and everyone who goes into mediation, including the clients, right? They're going into mediation, the parents are going to mediation, everybody's going in with the expectation that there is a person who is going to help them come to an agreement, then you can't be mad at that person for doing their job, which is simply to get you guys to come to an agreement.
Absolutely. And that's what I mean about you're the one that cares the most in
Yep.
the room, because the mediator is not going to care more than they'll care. I'm not saying they won't care, but to have an expectation that they're going to care as much as you and then take your side fully and you're going to walk out of there with everything that you want. And then if you don't, you get emotional about it or frustrated or mad at the mediator because you don't feel either they're listening. And sometimes that is the case. But to go in and understand that there is an expectation that this mediator is here to get us to come to an agreement that is in the best interest of the child, not to witness my story and to befriend me. And then we're going to go out to dinner afterwards. I mean, we get really sort of caught up in
Yeah.
that emotional space when
Well, I think it's, I'll try, tell me if I'm wrong on this, but I think it's because when a protective parent is going through this journey, you're looking for anybody
to
who
listen.
who will
Yeah,
actually see what's really happening. Like somehow, what
yeah,
usually happens behind closed doors, you want the people who are out there to see through the facade that the protective parents are unable to see through when they first meet this love bomber, this charmer, right? But it is the love bomber and the charmer who often shows up. Although I will say, mediation is probably one of the best times for them to be, because in a way they are behind closed doors. And if you are in, by the way, if a client is in a mediation that is confidential, which most are, but not all, so you want to, we always tell clients to ask. If it's confidential, we like to joke, you can jump up on the table and shake your booty in people's faces and the court doesn't get to hear about it, right? So the point is, your abusive co-parent can behave badly and it's never going to reach the court's ears because it's confidential.
I think that's such a
So,
great point, Renee. That is
yeah,
such a great point, and that leads to triggers, right? And clients getting emotional, and do you see this, and all of that, and the mediator is not there to regulate all of that stuff. They are there to figure out a way to work with what they have and get
yes,
you to agree as
that's right.
much as you
That's
possibly
right.
can.
And you
Yeah.
don't know if you will. And so
Yeah,
I
no,
love to tell clients, take notes. You're allowed to take notes. I mean, ask just in case, you found the one mediation place that doesn't, but we always like to say, take the notes. And I like to say, get the quotes, because
absolutely.
sometimes some of the stuff they say is, first off, such a huge clue, because if they're being particularly combative, if they're saying pretty much no to everything, then you know that this is an exercise in futility. And many people might know that right off the bat, but they're not ready to throw in the towel yet. But if it looks like it is an exercise in futility, which unfortunately often it is with a narcissist, not always, but often, then take those quotes. And I like to say, you're looking for two different kinds of quotes. One of them is clues into what your abusive co-parent is going to say to the guardian ad litem, the evaluator, the judge, whatever. The other is just the humdingers that you want to tell your friends when you get out, right? So that you can just walk out and be all like, you're not going to believe some of this
Really
stuff I said. I've
good.
got direct quotes here, just to kind of give yourself a little bit of control over the insanity, and then the ability to just laugh about it with somebody who wasn't in the room with you, and just sort of take it down a bit, right? But some of it is kind of like, and he actually said this and she actually said that, right? It's like you want to share this with people.
Yeah, absolutely. Writing stuff down is one of, I think, the best tools that help you in the mediation room. And
Yeah.
this is where I love the parts work that I get to do comes into play, right? If you're sitting there, there's a whole lot of things that are going to happen in your system. And there's a part of you that's going to want justice right now. There's a part of you that when they're telling the story and the opposing counsel is telling a story, or your ex is being combative or whatever they're saying, well, telling a story and it involves getting your child a blue car. And then you go, oh no, that was black. Like there's this corrective part, this part that wants to make the other person look like they're the bad parent, or that they don't remember, to sort of see how much, who's the better parent. This is a place for us to then take a second and be aware of what's in our system. And
Mhm,
instead of saying it,
mhm.
so you don't look combative, right? Instead of
Yeah,
saying, write it down. Maybe bring a notepad, and if your mom part gets activated and it just goes, oh, he dropped the kid off 5 hours late, instead of getting emotional about it, write that down, right?
yeah,
Write that down.
yeah,
Instead of one-upping, write your one-upping comment down. Don't one-up it and say it, right? Don't participate in the game that the narcissist is playing with you, because they're looking to make it seem like, oh, look, they're just like me, when you're the protective parent in the room. And that's what they're trying to prove, that they're the protective parent and you're actually the bad parent. So any of those lies, if there's a justice part that comes up and a lie comes out of their mouth, don't
mhm.
blurt out the truth right then and there. Just write it down. So
Right.
if you can externalize as much as you can. If you can't write and you're so upset and you can't write, draw. I don't care if there's squiggly lines on your page,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
maybe make a note here or there while you're sitting there. It really helps to externalize these parts that you have.
Get it out. Yeah, that's so true. And again, it doesn't I think it's important to remind yourself, if they're trying to make you look bad again, it doesn't matter what anybody looks like in that room. This is the mediator,
It's the
right?
media.
It's confidential mediation. But I think that the idea of writing down these things, writing down the facts you're getting, writing down something that's interesting to think about, writing down something you want to respond with, writing down their quotes, whatever it might be, it will keep you from starting to do things that can hurt your mediation process. Or if you don't end up with a successful mediation, unfortunately, give them something that they can then walk away with, right?
Yeah.
And use in the case, because they know that you want something, so they're going to make sure that you don't get it. Because that's another reason that we don't want to say much, because if they know what we want, they know what else to say no to. And so it's better for you to just kind of, keep things where they are. Um,
Yeah.
Gosh, let me I'm trying to, oh. So, I love the idea of writing things down. I feel like one of the tools, and I mean, you're the tool person, but what I will say with some pride, that there's a tool that I like to recommend, to protective parents in order to help them through it, which is, you even though it doesn't matter what anybody in that room thinks, um, if it's confidential, um, you also, I think, we're constantly saying, don't get emotional, don't get emotional. So one of the tricks that I like to share is the whole, I know you've heard this, is the whole shoving your tongue to the roof of your mouth pretty strongly, not so that you're hurting yourself, not so that you're in pain. You'll know. And when you do that, it actually it keeps, we're always saying, it keeps you from actually just crying. You might get a little verklempt still, but you're not going to end up like, crying and losing control. And that also just regulates what's going on and allows you to have a better sense of where to go next and how to pivot as you're in mediation.
Oh, yeah, I love that one. Another one that provides balance if you find yourself dysregulated is having some sort of squishy ball. You could do a stress ball, you could do maybe one of your child's toys, something that provides you comfort. And then you just sort of do a bilateral left right exchange. And you can actually do that under the table off the Zoom
Uh-huh.
camera, and it's engaging your left brain and your right brain. And so
Yeah.
just back and forth, it's just going to keep you calm and stay grounded in what's going on, especially if you start to notice that activation. Another tool I like to tell people is, you pretty much know yourself. Like, in your body, when I get upset, I start to get really hot, right? So maybe have something like a cool pad near you. And if you notice that you're starting to get hot, it's really good because when we start to feel that activation, oftentimes we'll have manager parts that start thinking in the future and start planning about what you need to do next and so forth. And that takes you out of the present. So maybe having a cold compress nearby and putting it on your arm or on your leg or somewhere to just sort of touch you back into this space that, okay, I'm okay. I'm in my body right now. That person's on Zoom. I'm okay. And even if you're in the courtroom, you can still have those things. If you're somebody who tends to get cold, they have those like little heat warmers, grab something that's warm. So any of those types of things that can orient you to the present and back into your body and out of your head space, thinking about all these horrible things that may happen or what that person is saying right now. These are wonderful tools to have with you in mediation. And the last one I'll mention is an essential oil. Essential oils pass the blood-brain barrier. And so that aromatherapy instantaneously helps you to, peppermint will keep you staying alert, right? Orange citrus will give you some clarity. So, and if lavender will help soothe and calm. So there's different things that you can do, but the biggest tools that I would say, if you're going to be in a space where a fight flight response is going to pop up and you cannot fight and it doesn't look good to fight, then what can we do to be in our bodies and stay connected and present in the space? And so those are some tools that I share often with our clients.
I love that. And I feel like it's so important for people who are just learning about essential oils that you really want to get pure essential oils, because then you get the effect from it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, gosh, we've covered a lot. What else do we want to talk about?
I mean, maybe we can talk a little bit about if, let's say you did have a failed mediation. It didn't turn out the way that you wanted it to turn out. We can end with that. So
yeah, I think that's a great thing to talk about, because I think that a lot of we have moms who say, look, I know that we're never going to be able to come to an agreement. I know we aren't, but we have to go through the motions. It's required. And they'll go in, and yet they'll still come out the other end, even though they knew it wasn't going to work and that there wouldn't end up being an agreement. They still come out blaming themselves.
yeah,
Like they failed. The
absolutely.
mediation failed. And so somehow they fail, and, they have self-doubt afterwards. And there's this thing that happens quite frequently when you have an abusive personality, who you're mediating with anyway, where, it seems like they're coming to an agreement, and then they go back and, and I always tell our clients, have your lawyer be the one to write it up, because a lot of times I'll say, have them write it up so that, we can save you the money. And I'm like, just, this is the money. This is where you spend it. Do not have the other lawyer write it up. Do not have a narcissist's lawyer write it up, because it unfortunately often it just doesn't represent what was actually discussed and supposedly agreed upon. But have your lawyer do it. But even after that, and after it's sent, our clients will be the ones, the protective parents will be the ones ready to sign it. And it's the abusive parent who's all kind of like, I'm not even going to sign that, after the hundreds, possibly thousands of dollars you spent preparing for and spending the time in mediation. And so the whole thing feels like a failure and more money out the window.
Yeah. And, and you may not even know it, but what you're tapping into is that sense of loss. And we can't even often verbalize the sense of loss or any of those things. And because after that failed you wait so long for a mediation. These court cases, it's not like it happens next week. It takes a while. And so then you get there and there's this sense of, man, what was all that for?
Yeah.
Right? And
Yeah.
then the internalized toxic shame of, I failed my kid, or I'm a bad mom. And then all the thoughts in the part that mimics the abuser in your head then gets rental space again.
It's like their voices. Yeah, you're saying it to yourself. You're using their words on yourself.
You've been co-opted all over again, right? You've spent all this time and then it doesn't work out the way you think. And then boom, you're right back where you started in your head. That's that psychological and emotional abuse happening all over again. So it's important. Yeah, it's important to know that, if you have a failed mediation, that is not the end of the world. I was sent to mediation twice, and I was told you only go to mediation once and then you go to the hearing, and everybody's story is different. And the judge was like, you guys are going back to mediation. You do not want to come back and see me. And so we went back to mediation, different mediator, but there are other options. So it is not the end all be all, and it doesn't make you a bad parent.
Yeah, if anything, I would argue because sometimes parents will say, well, because I was asking for such details, they didn't want to agree with that. So I must have done something wrong. But, I say this a lot. We have the clients who follow a detailed parenting, like detailed, like 35-page parenting plans. And then we have the ones whose lawyers took a look at their 35-page drafts and said, no way am I going with this. No way will they agree to this. And when we talk, and so they give in and they say, well, what are you going to use? And then they go in with this 5 or 6, 7, 8-pager. And when we talk to these clients later, it's the ones who said, my lawyer is really not going to like me right now, but too bad. This is the agreement. This is the proposal that we're putting forward. We are fighting down to the detail. These are the clients who 1, 2, 3 years later come back and say, oh, no, my life has been changed since we signed that. Now everything's in place. There's no more chaos. He isn't controlling everything. He isn't coming and going as he pleases. And then we've got the clients who basically caved, in which, hey, they're being coerced to do so. But in doing so, they're like, it's like I signed something and now I have no recourse because I signed it. And everything's just the same or even worse as it was before. So I think that if a client goes in with a detailed agreement and they're like, no, we're not going to do that. It's too much. We're going to say no. And there's failure there. I don't consider that a failure. You're calling them out on who they are, and you're making sure that you're protecting your children. And that's what's going through my head. And it's worth the fight to make sure that you don't spend another however many years you've got left because of however old your youngest is, to be dealing with the shenanigans and the chaos and the control for 10, 12, 14, sometimes 17 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So much added mental stress that you can spare yourself from if you take the time and be detailed and listen to our tips that we're sharing. So, I think that's it for this week's episode of Courageous Custody.
Yes. Right? Before we go, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, whether live or on replay. We are so grateful to have helped in any way we may have with Courageous Custody.
Yeah. So we have some great takeaways for this week. Remember, prep the detailed proposal, prep the lawyer, and stay grounded.
Yeah. Next week, join us again at 7 p.m. Eastern here. Like or follow or bookmark, whatever all those fun things are. Do that so that you can get the notifications and not miss a thing, because what we're talking about might catch you just when you need it. Don't forget to check the comments to get a free copy of the court appearance prep list. And you can go to thecustodyblueprint.com to find out more information about the different ways that you can get help in your case.
Yeah. And so leave your own comment about your experience with this topic and any topics that you'd like to see discussed in the future. And wherever you are listening, remember, you are not alone. Until next time, stay strong, stay informed, keep fighting for what matters most.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.